Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzinski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. Have you ever wondered how a company sets up the charitable arm of its organization? Our guest today is going to give us the inside look. Neil Willenson is the vice president of community relations at Kapco Inc. and co-founder of Camp Hometown Heroes and Camp Reunite. Thanks for joining us.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, it's an honor to have you. When I first met you, Neil, you were in charge of a summer camp that you founded, and it was for kids with HIV and AIDS. You were right out of college, only 22 years old. Most people would have looked for a job. Why did you start the camp?
You know, it's kind of a convoluted story, but this is not at all the life journey that I expected. I wanted to go to Hollywood. I was going to be an actor. I was studying film at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but my life changed profoundly because I was a camp counselor at Camp Minikani, which is in Hubertus, and then I went out to the Poconos and I was a camp counselor. And the secret is when you tuck the kids in at night, the kids think you're just trying to engage them in a conversation, and that's true to a degree, but you want to get to the staff lounge as quickly as possible to hang out with the other young people. But it is an opportunity. These are curious kids, so I simply read a book to the children each night, and that book was Ryan White's autobiography. And if you don't recall, Ryan White was essentially the first child in the country to share his
Remember
HIV
him well.
status.
Yes.
Amazing young man. And
He was.
took so many slings and arrows because he was really heroic and brave to share his HIV diagnosis at a time when people were not compassionate. The longer story short is at the end of that book, I had all the little boys, we put our hands together and we said, well, if you ever meet someone with HIV in your community, you don't have to freak out. You're not going to get HIV from a hug, from a seat, from a toilet seat, from a kiss. You don't get it that way, thank God. And I was tested a couple of months later because I was home for a little break from the University of Wisconsin my senior year, and I was reading the local newspaper, the News Graphic, and the headline said, AIDS hysteria in Mequon, local parents fear for their children's safety. And it sounded like a monster was on the loose, and it was just this little 5-year-old boy that wanted to go to kindergarten. And my children are, not much older than that. And I recalled just a couple months later teaching these kids about HIV, knowing I can't get HIV from a little kid. So I didn't do anything heroic. All I did was, after kind of getting over my anger that my little community was being ignorant about this disease, I just called up the woman featured in the article. And over the course of the next 2 years, I learned that the mom, Dawn Wolfe, was infected with HIV from her ex-husband who had since died. She had 2 children, one, Sean, who's HIV negative, and one, Niall, who's HIV positive. And without a medical miracle, Mom would die, and Niall would die, and Sean would be the sole survivor. And over the course of 2 years, I realized that Niall's pain, pretty healthy despite living with this disease, did not come from the medical manifestations of the disease. It came from us. It came from human beings being cruel to him. And that was the impetus to create, really out of nowhere, put Hollywood aside for a little while and start what we felt would be a one-time, 1-week safe haven for children with HIV. We called it Camp Heartland. We rented Camp Minikani, the Y camp, and kind of went back to my roots, and the program really grew from there.
Because really back then, kids couldn't go to camp themselves if they had HIV, I'm sure.
Legally, they were afforded that protection because doctors and researchers determined very, very quickly, thank goodness, that you could not get HIV in a casual manner. But there was still a lot of misinformation. And even today, there's some. 30, 40
still
years
a stigma,
yeah, there still is some stigma. And I've heard stories from my grandparents telling me that used to say the same thing about cancer. If Aunt Martha had cancer, you would whisper it. Yeah, absolutely whisper it. And it just takes a generation or two to kind of fight that ignorance or misinformation. But again, the camp truly grew, and it went from a 1-week program to ultimately raising about $50 million, and it's still in existence today.
What made you change after 20 years of doing that type of work to working for a corporation?
Well, one thing, I don't have any regrets about working with these kids. My life has been so profoundly affected by working with kids with HIV for the better. But as you would imagine, in an era where you could count the medicines that were available for these children on one hand or less, we lost over 100 children. And when you're at camp with the kids, they're like your little brothers or sisters. I was a foster parent to one of the kids. He has since survived. Niall, the boy that inspired the camp, I was with him at the Brewer game just 2 days ago. He's in his mid-30s. He's married. He's working on a family. He's a minister at 2 churches.
Wow.
So there really was a roller coaster of children living so far beyond what we ever could have imagined, because there are medicines now for people with HIV, particularly in wealthier nations. But the dramatic loss every single year of children just takes a toll. And then just as a founder, as an entrepreneur, at a certain point, you realize you've kind of contributed what you feel like you can, and that it might be time for a change. Someone with a different vision, a younger a younger executive director. And so we brought someone from within the program who used to be our camp director, and he's really taken the organization to new heights. So I was there for just shy of 20 years, and then moved over with Jim Kazmarek shortly thereafter.
How did you meet Jim?
Jim was a contributor to the organization, and a very generous one. During 2008-9, you remember the economy was pretty awful here and everywhere. And I sort of went to Jim, hat in hand. He was a friend of a friend, and asked him for a loan, an operating loan. And he said, I approve your loan, but I'm also going to give you $10,000, which I didn't even ask for. And I said, wow, this is a quality guy. He asked me, I was doing keynote speeches around the country at the time. He asked me to judge a charitable giving program that he had. It was like Oprah's Big Give. It was called the Kapco Charitable Challenge. And in essence, Jim gave college students that he did not know $1,000 and said, I want you to help someone that you don't know. I want you to take this $1,000. I want you to leverage it and raise even more and help people that you don't know. And it was a tremendous success. But while they were judging which team was the most effective, which is not an easy thing to do, they had me provide a keynote speech. During that keynote, two of the teams that had presented that day picked the same family. And it was a family in Grafton, a woman by the name of Karen Longoria. She was a single mother of quadruplets. One died at birth. So now we've got a single mother of triplets. That's pretty hard.
That's a lot of work.
I can't even imagine. Two were born with cerebral palsy, which can be serious, but typically not degenerative. So the kids didn't need a handicapped accessible home. By the time I heard about them, they were 11, 12 years old. But they were then diagnosed with a form of muscular dystrophy called spinal muscular atrophy. And within 3 or 4 weeks of that, Karen, the mother, was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. So, I mean, this was like the perfect storm of grief, of medical issues, of trauma. So when I heard about this, I had just been on Extreme Home Makeover twice with Camp Heartland.
You've been all over the place.
Well, it was a fun opportunity because, I was always nominating. We did a lot of reality TV. But the goal of this family, or the goal of these college teams, was to get this woman on Extreme Makeover because her home was not accessible. So it was a simple phone call for me. Literally, right after the judging and after my speech, I went back to my office. I called Quentin Strack, the casting director, and he was really interested, flew out here to see them and said, you won't believe this, but we've already had a family similar with spinal muscular atrophy and cancer, so we can't select him. And I went to Jim, and I said, well, Jim, maybe you can just help us widen the doors, put in some pergo floors. And he said, this is a blessing that they didn't get selected for ABC Home Makeover. Let's do this ourselves. And instead of me just paying for it, let's get 1,000 pair of hands to build that house. And that's ultimately what we did. So One Heartland, the charity I was with at the time, and Kapco came together as one with 1,000 volunteers. We took the house down to the studs. We rebuilt it, and Dateline NBC ended up documenting this in a really beautiful hour-long documentary. So Jim and I became, collaborators and really good friends. So after, being with the charity for almost 20 years, it's hard as an executive director to retire. But when you're the founder and you're known as the founder, it's a challenge. And the organization wasn't doing well financially. Programmatically, we were doing well.
Right.
But it's not like someone could come on and be assured of even getting paid. It was that challenging in those years. So I couldn't, leave on 2 weeks' notice. I couldn't, just send a resume to some advertising agency. And so
we weren't hiring in those years either.
You probably weren't. Yeah, it was probably the opposite of that. And so I was either going to start an advertising firm or a public relations agency or do other nonprofit work. And out of the blue, Jim Kazmarek, who's now a friend, called and said, Neil, I know you have Kimberly Locke was from American Idol. She was on our board of directors. He said, can you hook me up with a celebrity? I want to start a record label, and I don't even know how to do this.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
So my friend Kevin Suker, a dear friend of mine, was managing Eric Benet, who's a very well-known international R&B star from Milwaukee. And so Kevin and I and Jim were at North Shore Country Club having lunch together, and I wasn't saying much. I was just sort of the steward of the meeting, but Jim said, I'm starting a record label, I'm starting a baseball team, I want to do philanthropy. I just need someone to help me with all of this. He wasn't looking at me, wasn't thinking of me, but the light bulb went up.
Was going
and again, I went right back to my office. I said, Jim, how about in about 2 years, I'll come, be your VP of Community Relations. And he said, well, how about 2 weeks? And we compromised, with 4 months. And I shifted from One Heartland and retired and was able to head over.
Sounds like he won the negotiation.
He did, but
from 2 years to 2 weeks.
I was
4
ready.
months,
I was proud of what we accomplished, but it was time. I'd done work with kids with HIV for 20 years and proud of that, but it was time for some new challenges.
Kapco is a very progressive company in many ways. Tell us a little bit about what the company does.
You know, it's something that I had no familiarity with. I'm a film guy and an acting guy, and it's just something I never thought of is metal forming, is metal stamping. But if you look around even this studio, there's metal parts, and Kapco doesn't make anything real glamorous, but we make parts of things that are really enjoyed by many people. Polaris motorcycles, ATVs. We have military contracts with Oshkosh Truck where we're making vehicles that keep our troops safe in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere. So it's all componentry. But Jim, he's 56, about 10, 11 years ago, had already accomplished a lot of the financial goals that he set forth for himself and the company. And he said, you know, it's his words, it was go time for him now. All of the other pursuits, all the other dreams, his humanitarian work, it was now go time for those projects. And that started about 10, 12 years ago.
So how many of those projects are going on right now?
When I started with him, I've been with him for 8 years. He really only had 2 different companies. He had Kapco Metal Stamping, which is the mothership. It's a premier Midwest metal forming, metal stamping, fabricating, welding company. We have, 8,000 parts a year. We send our parts all over the world. It's an impressive, Midwest-based company. And he also had some painting companies, one in Oshkosh now, and he had one in West Bend. But when I started with him, he was launching the Lakeshore Chinooks baseball team, which is a college wooden bat team.
Right.
It's essentially run by college interns. There's a small skeletal staff, but Robin Yount is an investor, and Bud Selig has been involved. Bob Euchre's part of the owners group. And then he formed K-Nation Entertainment, which is a local music company that I help lead. And then he launched Given Music Publishing, which is a Nashville house for singer-songwriters, and they build a publishing catalog. The publishing company owns half the song, and the writer owns half, and they try to exploit that and get them on movies and on the charts. And Garth Brooks cut one of the songs. And then he has Speedcore, which is an automotive group that essentially takes muscle cars and re-outfits them with carbon fiber. A couple of them were just in the Fast 8 movies and Jay Leno's program, Jay Leno's Garage.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
And Robert Downey Jr.'s bought a few cars. And then his philanthropic work. And just this week, we launched a new endeavor called Inspire America Speakers Bureau. And for about, 20 years, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of celebrities. We book them for charity events, the AIDS Walk and others. And so we've now put a whole agency around this with the goal of if a charity or business or civic organization needs an athlete, a celebrity, a politician, a speaker, we are able to go after anyone. And we've secured people ranging from Lance Bass of NSYNC to REO Speedwagon for different events.
Awesome.
Wow.
So that's the mouthful, but it's a really engaging enterprise, and these are full pursuits. So Jim really he's there every day. He's engaged in the business. He runs Kapco. He makes sure that the manufacturing company is strong because that's what helps us sustain all the other things that we do in the community.
So let's get back a little bit to the philanthropy part. What do you do as VP of Community Relations?
Well, it's interesting for me, other than my work with Hometown Heroes, which we can talk about, I'm on the other side of the table now. So I have the privilege of working with a lot of different charities and writing some checks to those charities. In many ways, we prefer fuller partnerships. So Operation Dream is a wonderful Central City organization that takes African-American young men, and it's like 90% or more of those kids don't have a father in the home. And these men mentor these boys and really get them on a great track. So that's not just an organization that we write checks to, but we have them out at our summer camp facility. We hire some of the young men. They help us with our charity events. It's really a mutually beneficial partnership, and that's sort of our approach to philanthropy. Also, a lot of our employees get involved. So we're looking for ways for our employees to get involved. We're looking for groups that want to come out and utilize our summer camp because we've got a year-round facility for smaller organizations that will benefit from a little financial contribution. And these are kind of all the things that we look for.
How does Kapco make decisions about charitable giving? How do you choose what you're going to do?
It's so hard, Dan, because we don't have a foundation, so it's corporate profit, and there's ebb and flow to that. Some months Jim says, okay, Neil, you've got this many thousands of dollars, and he might say, okay, this month we're going to hold off, but you can invest more next month. So for the first 5 years I was there, I met with dozens of charities a year. And I did some, advising. He was allowing me to serve on some board of directors as part of my workday. I was honored to do it. I've slowed that down a little bit because we have such a long queue of organizations, but we probably have 200 organizations that we vetted, that we look at the financials and we meet with the board members and have a good idea of the great work that they're doing. But Jim, who has 5 children, most of them grown now, just feels blessed about that. And our priority are programs that help children and families in need in our community. And it's a long range from Big Brothers and Sisters to, as I mentioned, groups like Operation Dream.
Do you make the decisions about who you give money to, or is it you and Jim, or do the employees have a say as to where they would like some of the money to go?
It's a little bit of all of that. So I absolutely have some autonomy. There's some months where he says, Neil, here's $20,000 to contribute, and he trusts that we're going to utilize it in the best way possible. And there's other times where he says, give me the Excel of everyone asking, and he personally will review it and make some decisions. And then there's other times, like perhaps at a holiday party, where we do a raffle, and the winner, the employee that draws the winning thing, gets to determine out of a list of 30 or 40 vetted charities which one they'd like the funds to go to.
Oh, that's neat.
And the last employee that did it gave me a pretty hard time. I gave him 5, and he said, no, I'd like to see more. And then I gave him 10. He said, I'd like to see more. And he and his wife took it as a real privilege and obligation to pick the right one. He ultimately ended up giving it to our friend Danny Goki from American Idol, had a charity called Sophia's Heart. And Danny was so pleased to receive those funds, especially when he learned how serious this manufacturing employee had taken that mission.
So you've dedicated your life to being a pay-it-forward guy and working on the nonprofit side. And Jim, is ultimate capitalist, right? And now a philanthropist. How does that dynamic work between the two of you?
Well, we don't talk politics,
okay.
So that's probably good. He's not a political guy, but, we really see eye to eye on helping kids. And our focus right now, we do have a facility near West Bend that our affiliated charity, we have a charity that Jim founded called Hometown Heroes. And the DNR was kind enough to give us a 15-year lease on a camp that had been shuttered for a couple of years. So we've got this beautiful facility, and Jim and I and our team there see eye to eye, and it's what Oprah's been talking about. It's what First Lady Tanette Walker's been talking about. It's this concept of trauma-informed care, that if you don't address childhood trauma, it has a world of hurt. And there's even studies that show there's something called adverse childhood experiences. This could be divorce, it could be absentee parents, it could be abuse of any kind, it could be neglect, incarceration. If you have 3 or 4 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, they've done longitudinal research saying it actually affects the lifespan by up to 20 years. So someone that has trauma as a child, and my mom had trauma. My mom's mom died when she was 7 years old. My grandma, who I never met, was in her 30s, died of breast cancer. No one ever intervened for my mom. She's in her mid-70s now. There was no grief counseling. There was, no help for her. She was shuttled from family to family. That is traumatic, and to this day, while she's had a happy life, it's affected her deeply. And so where Jim and I really see eye to eye on the use of our philanthropic funds, the use of our beautiful facility in Campbellsport, is how can we help kids facing trauma. In Camp Hometown Heroes, which is our camp for kids who have made the ultimate sacrifice. They lost a loved one in service to our nation, as well as a new program called Camp Reunite. This is for children who have a mom at Techita prison, and the kids are going to come to us for the week. And on 2 occasions, the warden, the very kind-hearted warden, I asked her for 1 visit. She said, how about 2? And the kids are going to be up with their moms for 5 hours on 2 different occasions. And they're going to reunite with the mom. They're going to learn coping skills and violence prevention and things like that. So Jim and I absolutely see
Try
eye to
to break
eye.
the chain, right?
Without a doubt. And, they don't know, there absolutely is a correlation, between kids that have an incarcerated mom that they may end up there themselves. They don't know if that's because of the poverty, because of the incarceration. They don't know for sure, but it's something like 70% of children that have an incarcerated parent, may end up there themselves without that intervention. So Jim and I are, partners with the help of literally thousands of people. That's Jim's mission. It's not just for him to roll up his sleeves or me to roll up our sleeves. He wants all hands on deck. And the more young people in particular that are helping, whether it's our toy drive, we collect about 25,000 toys a year. He wants young people to support all of these endeavors.
Well, and I think this is the time to do it because the young people really do like to get involved in things that involve, the environment or social responsibility. And I think they expect that of corporations too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There was Steve Hartman on CBS who's done some profiles on Hometown Heroes, had a report a couple of weeks ago about a 4-year-old boy that's a little superhero. He wears a superhero cape and he uses his own money. Now he doesn't have to because his GoFundMe raised so much money, but he gives like chicken sandwiches to all the homeless. And he says, share love, share love. And when you see a 4-year-old boy that is so imbued with this value of giving, it gives you hope for the next generation.
Sure.
Boy, it really does. I mean, and then who could refuse a little 4-year-old too?
Hugging everybody, hugging everybody.
So is there a process that you can recommend? We try to help other companies here on Brandstorm with a variety of things, but is there a process that you can recommend to companies that want to build a corporate responsibility program? I mean, how do you even get it started?
You have to hone in because there are thousands of amazing charities in this region and maybe 1 million nationally. And so what makes you tick? What's important to your employees? And I really encourage those listening to incorporate some volunteerism to it. Kohl's has the best program I've ever heard. A Kohl's employee, if there's a group of 5 or more Kohl's employees and they come and volunteer for 3 hours or more, you get paid as a charity $100. So you get their service and you get $100 per employee. This summer, we'll have 80 Kohl's employees come to Camp Hometown Heroes to volunteer. So not only do we get the services of 80 employees, we get an $8,000 contribution. So that's one extreme where it's just part of the Kohl's culture of helping kids. Kohl's cares for kids. And then there's companies like Direct Supply that allow their associates during the workday, they prefer workday, to come out and volunteer at the camp. And so it runs the gamut from companies that say every employee gets 8 hours a year paid time to go volunteer to local charity, to some that literally shut down for a day and they bring a bus up to camp and they paint buildings and do things. So I've seen it all, but I think that the owner of the company really has to determine what are his or her priorities. For us, we don't make them political. We really try to avoid controversy, gun stuff, abortion stuff. We just find kids in our community that are in need. We look at also our workforce. Is there something that's a win for the business as well? And is there something in our business that ties to a charity like Junior Achievement or MATC that helps train the next generation of welders? There's a shortage of skilled folks to come out and work at Kapco. We probably have 30 openings as we speak. And is there a charity that maybe could help feed employees? And then we're providing an opportunity. So we look for win-win relationships, but for us, we're looking for places that our employees can get involved. I don't think I've ever said no to an employee that has a charity that they're deeply involved in. If they come to us, we're going to help in some way. And so that's the best thing. If an employee says, Neil, I'm on the board of United Cerebral Palsy, we're going to find a way to support and honor that employee.
Do you think, Neil, that all the things that Kapco does also attracts employees? People want to come work for Kapco because you do so many charitable things.
It's definitely not a business strategy because we're not a consumer brand, so we're not a bank, we're not Harley Davidson. Never once in 8 years has Jim said to me, with our philanthropic dollars, where's my logo going to be? Is my logo on the shirt?
Right.
It's, if a charity, we don't say no. If a charity wants to put our logo on the shirt, that's fine. We're not an anonymous giver, but we don't expect it. When it's marketing dollars, when it's, Angela Bonovich, our director of marketing, takes marketing dollars, and maybe it's a charity program because maybe there's nothing for us to advertise this month other than employees and, who's
you
buy
probably do. For the listeners that aren't in the southeastern Wisconsin market, you're one of the most innovative marketers for employment that I've ever seen.
That's where the marketing dollars go. But in lieu of that, our marketing approach for the last several years has been, well, let's do some marketing philanthropic hybrid work. Let's sponsor the Milwaukee Admirals and do the power play goal. So our brand gets out there, employees get to go to the game, employee of the month gets to drop the puck. The Admirals are great at this kind of thing, but we're also supporting Operation Dream every time there's a power play goal. So for that, we would expect some brand recognition because we're using marketing dollars. But with the philanthropic monies that I'm in charge of, Jim, to his credit, it's purely humanitarian, has never asked, where's my brand going to be? But I think, so you asked the question, Nancy, does it help business? We definitely have heard from customers that they like the culture. And I have no doubt from talking to different HR officials and Jenny Wenger, who leads our talent acquisition, that the culture is attractive to people that have their eyes open and their hearts open. They want to work for a company that's helping the community. So I know for senior talent, we're hearing it all the time, that this is a place they want to be because of that philanthropy.
Do you think it's better to align corporate giving to a meaningful cause that's more meaningful to employees or to customers, or does it matter at all?
We have not focused on what's important to customers in that regard. In every other regard, yes.
Right.
But I will say our customers are deeply involved in our efforts, and it's surprising. Usually you wouldn't ask a customer to buy a table for a gala.
But it's
we usually
contagious.
invite them to our galas because
Right.
Kapco's a sponsor. Our biggest gala is called the Grand Slam Charity Jam. This year we had the lead singer of the Romantics, the Bodines, Mr., and Ambrosia. Last year we had the Commodores, we've had the Jacksons. It's a great event. So Kapco purchases 50, 60 tickets, and a lot of customers attend, but there's other customers that choose to buy tables to support us. So I think particularly with this cause, Camp Hometown Heroes for Kids of Fallen Military, it's really hard to be opposed to that regardless of what your viewpoint is, your worldview, your political affiliation. I think we all have an obligation to help those that have have defended our nation. And so
Absolutely.
I don't know that I've surveyed customers, but I will say I'm really personally touched by how our customers, Western, Douglas Dynamics, have helped us. Everything from giving the camp a snowplow to buying a very expensive table at our charity event.
You know, after listening to you and all the things you're involved in, this may really kind of seem like a silly question, but it's more on a personal level. Now you're working for a big corporation, you're fulfilling a lot of dreams. Is that enough for you, or do you think someday you're going to go back to wanting to create something of your own again?
You know, I have been so engaged the last 8 years because Jim is the kind of guy that he can say, let's help military kids. I can think about it. I can go into his office a week later and say, how about a Camp Hometown Heroes for Kids of Fallen Heroes? He says, I love it. Let's do it. Let's go.
Right. So you get to do that.
Speakers Bureau. Jim, you know, we're working with Kimberly Locke and friends with Alicia Rulin of High School Musical. She emailed me. She says she wants to start speaking. I said, we work with so many speakers anyway. Should we start a Speakers Bureau? That sounds great, Neil. Go for it. Let's get it done. So there is this ability to bring him an idea and execute. And that's an exciting place to be. It really is.
Yeah, why would you want to jump out there again?
Yeah, the only thing I'm doing, I still do acting on the side, and I have a website called Power of Humans that a friend and I have built, and it's a Facebook page. We have well over 100,000 followers, and it's just a good news site. Nothing political. It's, you know, animals and kids and babies. It really is unicorns and rainbows at a time when people need that, and a lot of people just go every single day and just start their day with one happy story, and we've got about 3,000 subscribers, and that's been a fun little personal project.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Your life just sounds so much. I mean, it just sounds so fulfilling. It really does.
I'm blessed, and you know he's a great boss for sure. But I'm just been surrounded in all of these endeavors by so many wonderful people. Camp Hometown Heroes, Camp Reunite. People really are lining up to walk next to us on these great fun endeavors.
Well, you could have done something else, but you chose to give, to help, to lend a hand. You've done it your entire career.
I never viewed it as a choice. I mean, when a 5-year-old boy who at the time really was dying needed friendship and needed some liberation and needed a place of unconditional love, it wasn't even an option to me. It just seemed to be the right thing to do. And, you know, 1 week turned into almost 20 years and off we go. So, you know, on the side, I can still be Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof here and there at a local Next Act theater. But, you know, my heart is still with philanthropy for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, there's an ad campaign that is out there for a hotel group. It's the Bada Book Bada Bing.
Oh, sure.
Bada Book Bada Boom.
Oh, yeah.
Campaign, and they say talk about people glowing, and the one guy goes, nobody glows, and I'm like,
he gets it.
You know what? Neil glows. I mean, you can just see it. You know, the way you talk, the way you express yourself on this. That it's genuine, and it's just amazing what Kapco has done as a startup company here and their national impact on the things that they've done. So thank you for that.
It's an honor to do. It's an honor to do it, and I know for Jim Kasmerick, it's an honor, and he's getting involved in even more things.
He's one of the owners of the Bucks, right?
Yeah, and a soccer team that's launching.
Team,
it's a lot of excitement, and Speed Corps is growing at an incredible rate.
I just saw him at the closing of the Bradley Center event.
Shine On, that was a nice event.
That was a great event, and he's a busy guy, and we talked a little bit about our old Gold Club days and with the Brewers getting the stadium built here, and he's just been a driving force in keeping this town moving.
Yeah, he does a lot of it quietly. He's really more of a introspective kind of guy, and so the publicity is sometimes a little tougher for him. He's very, very humble, but he's just honored to do this and take kind of his good fortune, and he invests a lot of it into the company. Unlike a lot of business owners, they're spending, maybe on other businesses. He doesn't bleed Kapco to support the others. He uses Kapco's assets and resources to help build these self-sustaining businesses. So whether it's the publishing company,
it's a great entrepreneur.
He's really done good work here.
So if somebody wanted to connect with you, Neil, what's the best way to do that?
There's so many ways. I'm very accessible. So you could just call Kapco in Grafton, and I'm the only Neil that is at the company. So that's probably the easiest way. And Kapco Metal Stamping's on Facebook, LinkedIn, and everything else.
Well, thank you so much. Best of luck to you. I don't think you need it. You guys are doing wonderful things, and we all benefit from that. So thank you, Neil.
My pleasure. Thanks for the chat. I enjoyed it.
And if you like what you've heard today, please don't forget to review, share, or subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzinski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of regional, national, and even global brands on a daily basis. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.